This is the untold story of the last years of Charlie Munger's life. Years filled not with quiet retirement, but with bold decisions, fierce battles, deep reflection, and the kind of wisdom that only comes from standing face to face with the end. Most people know Charlie Munger as Warren Buffett's legendary partner. Fewer know the story of the man behind the legend, what he struggled with, what he feared, what he learned, and what he tried desperately to teach the world before his time ran out. This is not a story about money. It's a story about the mind of a man who spent a century trying to understand how life really works and used his final years to reveal everything he had discovered. To understand Charlie's last years, you must first understand who he became. Charlie Munger started life with very little, a poor young man from Omaha, a boy who worked in Buffett's grandfather's grocery store for pennies, a boy who had no idea that fate was quietly preparing him for a life of impact beyond imagination. He went to college, then to war, then to Harvard Law School, without finishing his undergraduate degree. His first marriage failed. One of his children died of leukemia. He lost an eye. He went bankrupt during a period of extreme hardship. And yet, he rebuilt everything. He rebuilt his fortune, rebuilt his philosophy, rebuilt his character, and built a mind powerful enough to reshape Warren Buffett himself. By the time Charlie entered his final decade, he had nothing left to prove. He had money. He had influence. He had respect. He had a legacy. But Charlie wasn't done, not even close. Because the great secret of Charlie Munger's life is this: his mind did not age. His body weakened, but his thinking sharpened. And in his last years, between 2018 and 2023, Charlie delivered some of the strongest warnings, boldest insights, and deepest wisdom of his entire life. This is where our story begins. Charlie Munger's last years were marked by a profound clarity that can only come when a man is old enough to stop caring about what anyone thinks. He no longer softened his words. He no longer worried about politeness. He spoke the truth exactly as he saw it, raw, unfiltered, uncompressed. He became a lighthouse for anyone seeking rationality in a world drowning in noise. His first major warning of his final era was simple: easy money breeds stupidity. Charlie saw something coming that most economists and investors refused to acknowledge. He saw the psychological damage created by a decade of zero interest rates. He saw young people turning speculation into identity. He saw companies valued on fantasy. He saw financial markets turning into casinos powered by emotion instead of logic. And he said, "This will end badly." The world laughed. His warning was called old-fashioned, out of touch, outdated. But Charlie had lived through every financial cycle of the last 100 years. He had seen the Roaring '20s euphoria, the Great Depression collapse, the post-war boom, the 1970s inflation crisis, the 1980s recovery, the 90s dot-com bubble, the 2008 crash. History had been his teacher, and the lesson was always the same. When people believe they can get rich quickly without effort, the consequences are severe. Charlie also saw something else, something deeper than markets: a transformation in human behavior. He noticed that people were more emotional, more reactive, more fragile, more anxious, more addicted to distraction. He saw society losing the very skills that allowed him to succeed: patience, discipline, clarity, long-term thinking. To Charlie, these weren't old virtues. They were survival tools, tools the modern world was forgetting. In his final years, Charlie fought 3 great battles most people never saw. The first battle was against financial delusion. He watched the rise of meme stocks, influencers posing as experts, reckless gambling disguised as investing, and a generation convinced that price always goes up simply because it must. He spoke bluntly. We are breeding a culture of speculation, a culture that confuses movement with progress. And he warned that easy wealth is the enemy of true wealth. The second battle was his war against crypto madness. This was perhaps his most controversial stance. Charlie called cryptocurrency rat poison, worthless, and most famously, trading turds. The internet mocked him. Young investors insulted him. Critics labeled him outdated. But Charlie didn't criticize the technology. He criticized the human psychology behind it, the greed, the envy, the fantasy of effort-free wealth. To him, the danger wasn't crypto itself. It was the idea that people could escape the laws of economics and character. He said, it encourages people to believe they can become wealthy without being productive. And that belief, in his eyes, was poison. His third battle was with ideological extremism. Charlie despised extremism of any kind: political, financial, social, intellectual. He believed extremism was the enemy of truth. In his final interviews, he said something almost no public figure dares to say. If you are absolutely certain about something complicated, you're probably an idiot. He championed nuance in a world addicted to outrage, and for this, he was both admired and ignored. Though the world saw an unshakable giant, Charlie's private life in his final years was filled with challenges. His health declined. His mobility weakened. His circle of lifelong friends grew smaller as death took them one by one. He outlived nearly everyone he loved. He carried a kind of loneliness only age can bring. Yet he never complained. He never indulged in self-pity. He faced aging the same way he faced investing, with calm clarity. He accepted mortality, not as a tragedy, but as a mathematical certainty. He joked often about death. He embraced it with humor and lightness. But beneath that humor was something deeper, the understanding that his time was running out and his wisdom was needed more than ever. And so in those final years, Charlie worked harder than people realized. He held interviews. He gave speeches. He lectured at universities. He answered emails. He refined ideas. He kept reading. He kept thinking. He kept teaching. Because he wasn't simply preparing for death. He was preparing the world for life without him. He said things he had never said before. He explained concepts he had spent decades refining. He issued warnings he hoped people would remember. He distilled nearly 100 years of experience into short sentences sharp enough to cut through delusion. His voice grew more urgent, not louder, but clearer. And for those listening, his final years were a masterclass in human nature, decision-making, and character. Then came November 28, 2023. Charlie Munger passed away quietly, peacefully, without spectacle, just as he lived. The news broke midday. At first, there was confusion. Then a wave of reflection spread across the financial world. A strange silence followed. Not dramatic, not chaotic, just a quiet moment of recognition that a giant had left. Warren Buffett, the man who shared a 65-year partnership with Charlie, did not give a public eulogy. He did not appear on camera. He did not make a speech. But those close to him said he grew very still. Buffett later wrote a simple, powerful statement. Charlie made me a better person. Charlie made me a better investor. Without Charlie, Berkshire Hathaway could not have been built. And the truth is even deeper than that. Without Charlie, Buffett would not have become Buffett. Charlie transformed him from a pure bargain hunter into a world-class business selector. Charlie gave him the mental models, the frameworks, the philosophies that built Berkshire into one of the greatest companies in history. But the world didn't just lose an investor. It lost a philosopher, a teacher, a truth-teller, a man who understood life with rare clarity. In the days after his death, something extraordinary happened. Millions, young, old, rich, poor, shared Charlie's quotes. Suddenly, the world realized something it had overlooked. Charlie's wisdom wasn't for investors. It was for everyone. People shared his insights on envy, on patience, on discipline, on character, on learning, on relationships. They discovered that behind every investment lesson was a life lesson, and behind every life lesson was a principle that could change the way they saw the world. Charlie never cared about legacy, but he built one anyway. His influence lives on in the investors who think long-term.
Instead of short-term. In the students who read books instead of scrolling endlessly. In the entrepreneurs who choose character over convenience. In anyone who takes responsibility instead of making excuses. In people who choose rationality in a world that rewards emotion. Charlie's philosophy can be summarized in a handful of rules. Rules he lived by until his final breath. Avoid envy. Avoid resentment. Avoid self-pity. Avoid anger. Avoid ego. Avoid low-quality people. Avoid addiction. Avoid debt. Avoid stupidity. Keep learning. Keep going. Be honest. Be patient. Be humble. Be rational. Be useful. That was his real portfolio. That was his true wealth. In the final analysis, the world without Charlie Munger is still shaped by Charlie Munger. His body is gone. His voice is silent. But his ideas have become immortal. His wisdom is now a blueprint. His clarity is now a compass. His principles are now a guide for anyone seeking to navigate a chaotic world with strength, clarity, and dignity. And that is the true legacy of Charlie Munger, a man who survived tragedy, mastered life, shaped history, and spent his last years giving the world every ounce of wisdom he had left. Not for glory, not for fame, not for followers, but for one simple purpose: to make the world a little wiser and to help people suffer a little less. Because in the end, Charlie Munger didn't want admirers. He wanted thinkers. He wanted learners. He wanted people who would build a better life by thinking clearly, acting rationally, and living with integrity. He wanted you not to become him, but to become the best version of yourself.